glad to be having you here with us. So I'm very, very excited. This is our first live, the first live in the series of extraordinary women. And you guys are these extraordinary women that inspire me very much. And I'm so, so excited to be talking to you today. So before we start, I would really ask for you to introduce yourselves, just to tell us a little bit about who is Miriam and who is Amaya, so that we can take it off from there.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, thank you for having us. We are both mothers that I think we're more warriors than anything else. My name is Miriam Gimal. I have twins, one of which has autism. And, you know, since I became a mother, everything's changed for me. And when you have a special needs child and the prognosis isn't so good, you get to choose your path. You're either going to accept that or you're going to find another way. Yeah. And I'm a mother who has done nothing more than find other ways. So in a world full of no's, I always find that yes. And that's who I am. And that's who I am with everything. I'm the person who's not going to take no for an answer. I will decide the prognosis of my diagnosis, which is life. No matter what God throws at me, I will find a way to make it work, to be happy with it, to have something grow from it. And in the process, to help other parents going through the same thing. Does that make sense?
Of course, of course. I'll make a comment on that right after Maya. So what we're going to do in this live, because we have two languages, and the idea is to have this to get to as many mothers as possible. So we are going to mix languages, but not a worry, we're going to have subtitles. So Amaya, you can speak English, you can speak Portuguese, just feel free. The idea is for us to have this to many people as possible. So Amaya, go right in and introduce yourself.
Olá.
You can speak Portuguese, no problem.
Olá, eu sou a Amaya Guterres, sou a mãe do Martim. O Martim, há 2 anos, teve um acidente de viação bastante grave e ficou com lesões a nível cerebral e também uma lesão na medula que o deixou tetraplégico. O Martim tinha 12 anos quando isto aconteceu e, logicamente, a vida da minha família deu uma volta de 360 graus. Nada fazia expectar, não é? Que isto nos pudesse acontecer. É uma coisa que nos apanhou completamente de surpresa. O Martim era um menino muito saudável, uma criança super feliz, normal como qualquer outra criança, e de repente fomos confrontados com um diagnóstico terrível. E em 2 anos ter que aprender a viver com isso e tentar dar a volta àquilo que aconteceu e tentar continuar a vida e não desanimar não é fácil, mas estamos no caminho, é um percurso que é preciso fazer. A Miriam, noutra perspectiva, já tem este percurso feito há muito tempo, nós estamos nesse caminho e acho que estamos a seguir o caminho correto.
Eu nem sei o que dizer. Na verdade, para os que nos ouvem, eu vos garanto que essa live vai vos deixar arrepiada, vai vos deixar só esse bocadinho que a Maya conta aqui e a introdução da Miriam. Quero que vocês assistam, quero que vocês ouçam cada detalhe dessas histórias, para que vocês saibam, para quem está nos assistindo, saiba que não existe não. A Miriam falou e eu fiquei arrepiada. É verdade, o não pode nos paralisar. Isso não pode acontecer. Não podemos, porque quando a vida nos atira algo, uma vida que é fácil, ou seja, que é normal, e de repente acontece uma coisa que nos tira do carris. Isso que aconteceu com a Maya, eu não sei se eu não... de certeza absoluta, qualquer mãe nem tem palavras para dizer como deveria reagir. E é uma guerreira, Maya, é uma guerreira. Miriam, what you say is, every time we get, I think life is like that. It throws so many things at us. And then to have people, warriors like you, say that, I didn't say yes. I didn't sit still and say, yeah, so it's fine. This is what my diagnosis, and I'm going to go ahead with this. Say no, and I'm not going to accept this. It's mind blowing for me. It's just so inspiring. So so tell us more. How exactly did you say no? What did you do? Considering that with your diagnosis and from what we read on the internet, there isn't really much you can do. At least until I met you guys, I have the same problem. My son is autistic, and I've been trying to see what's on the internet, what's happening, or reading studies non-ending. How did you say no, and what did you do exactly? Can you explain to us how and what exactly did you do?
Yes. So perfect. So first, what I did first was I cried a lot.
Okay. That's fair enough.
I was sad and devastated and heartbroken and scared. I was scared because, my daughter's 15, and 15 years ago, there was no Instagram lives or Facebooks or anything. There was no information. And the few people that I knew that could possibly have an autistic child, they weren't willing to talk about it. And nobody wanted, to have a label put on their child, not even me. And so the first thing I did was I went to, I would say, jail in my heart. Like, how like you create this armor so that nobody can get to you. But then in doing so, what you mostly do is you keep out the people who can help you, who can love you, who could, you keep out connection. And so I had to go through a really rough patch of becoming conscious myself about what I expected from life and mourn that life that I thought I was going to have. You see, it's so easy to see a mother like a warrior mom. You're like, yeah, she can do anything. But that you have to build that warrior. You're not born like that. You want your life to be the way you pictured it, the way they told you it was going to be, or the way your life has been up to that point. So I think it's very important that we honor that process first and foremost. I'm scared, I'm sad, I'm upset. We have to go through that, but it will come a point in which the suffering gets so bad, Ruth, that you have to choose whether you live like that forever or you start to ask yourself, why did this happen? Not to me, but for me. And I always knew since the day that the doctor said, your daughter has severe autism, I'm sorry. I just, this is what it is. She will never be independent. And you have to understand that when you're no longer around, she's going to have to be put in some kind of, hospital or, a home.
A home. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought to myself, like my intuition said, no, I won't. But my head at that moment was filling me with so much fear and uncertainty. What's really beautiful about us mothers is that eventually that fire, that love, that intuition will win. It will guide you if you let it. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, today, there's so much that can be done to help children with autism or any child having any kind of, developmental delay or disability, because we know so much. And so what I started to do was what everybody does, right? Internet. Every night, research. And I was very alone in this research. And there was very little things to read. But the things that made sense, I started to go with. I had the great pleasure of meeting Dr. Dolly de Leon. She is a microbiome specialist here in Panama. And she, at that point, was beginning this career. She was just beginning to develop the science. She's part of a team who developed this science. So,
Wow.
you know, she mentored me with everything that had to do with the gut and the parasites and the fungus and the food, you know, how her diet should be. And it gave me a path to sort of start walking. And I kept on improvising because she could only go as far as she could with the knowledge she had. And so then I went and I traveled all over the world, finding more and more and more. And it's sort of, you know, like how that puzzle piece, right? That iconic puzzle piece. To me, it's, you know, it's not about what's missing. It's about just putting together what's there. And I started to do that little by little. And some puzzle pieces did not fit in. I spent a lot of money. I spent a lot of time and hope in things that were really just out there, you know. I don't want to say the word to get us as a vulnerable group, because we are a vulnerable group. You know, we'll buy anything, we'll do anything to help our children. And so, you know, there were many things that didn't fit in, but then as the God may have it, you know, I started to get to those pieces that made sense. And I started to put together things that made sense. And when Raquel was around 5 years old, we went to this new therapy, and it's called MERT, from the Brain Treatment Center. And this therapy was only meant for, back then, it was FDA approved for depression, for OCD, for anxiety, but it could be used off-label for autism. Raquel was the first person with autism to try this. Like, I was that desperate. It was non-invasive, which is the reason why I said, you know what, let's do it. We've done more invasive things. And I'll explain a little bit later, if you want, what MERT is and how it works. But to really make it go straight to the point, at 5 years old, Raquel had severe autism. She did not speak. She did not know I was her mother. She did not follow not one instruction. She hurt herself constantly. She would bite herself. She would slam her head against the wall. Raquel had very bad anxiety. So for about a year, and that kept getting worse. For about a year and a half, she couldn't leave the house. Every time she left the house, she would scream, pull her hair. It was so chaotic that, you know, I was at the mall. I'm like, I'm going to go to the mall with my child. I deserve a Sunday with my family at the mall. And she had such a crisis that they asked me if she needed an ambulance. And I wasn't understanding how is she seeing the world? What is going on? And she's so unhappy. And so our life as we knew it was over, because yeah, she's severely autistic, but then that means something else as well. It means she's not healthy. And the reason I know is because she's constipated. She's not sleeping. She has bags under her eyes. She eats a lot, but doesn't gain any weight. Her stomach is always distended. And then on top of that, she doesn't talk. She doesn't understand. She doesn't follow instructions. She has no connection to her parents or to her environment or any consciousness about her environment. And we were already working on the gut. Today, we know a lot more than we did then. But we did as much as we could. So when we got to BTC, they did an EEG on her, quantitative EEG, which basically what it is this thing you put on your head. And if you go to a neurologist, they'll do an EEG to see if you have seizures or epileptic activity. But this EEG is different. It's called a quantitative EEG, and it's done when the child is awake. Now, obviously, she didn't love this. It doesn't hurt or anything, but they have to put a little hat on her head.
Yeah.
And kicked and screamed just because she was out of the house. And we actually got the information. And with this EEG, the doctor sat with me and said, okay, let me tell you about your daughter. And what the EEG does, it shows us what brain waves appear in what parts of the brain and at what times. And so for a brain to work and process correctly, there's a pattern for that. And so the best way to explain it, Ruth, imagine that our children's brain is like an orchestra. And they have all the instruments, cello, violin, piano, everything. But what they do miss is a reliable orchestra conductor to make that music flow, Because how does the brain work? And this is what the doctor explained to me. The back of the brain is meant to gather all of sensory information, what we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we smell. But the central and frontal lobes, what they do is analyze and understand the information from the back. The language is in the frontal lobe. Impulse control, emotional regulation, it's all up here. And children with autism tend to have sort of like a short circuit in the middle. They are getting all the information from the world, but they don't always have access to understand it, to process it, to communicate it, to execute it. And when they sat with me with her EEG, they said, here's the reason why your daughter doesn't speak. And they could see how her frontal lobe had no movement whatsoever. They could see how the world was literally attacking my daughter because the back of the brain wasn't organized either. So all the sensory information she was hearing, tasting, smelling, seeing was coming in such a disorganized manner. And she didn't have enough, connection to put it together to understand it. Okay. So I thought it was, first of all, amazing that somebody could take away for a second the diagnosis, put it aside and said, let me look at this person and this person's brain. And that gave me a lot of hope because I thought, well, if they can see it, they can help it. And that is exactly what happened because MERT, it's called magnetic EEG, EKG resonance therapy. It begins with the EEG, but then there's this machine that what it does, it's called transcranial magnetic stimulation. So what the machine for MERT does is that it takes the perfect protocol for each person. So that EEG gave the doctors the information they needed to program the equipment to create a frequency in which both areas of the brain could be connected at the exact frequency, location, and intensity that my daughter needed to start to connect both parts of the brain. And the second day of treatment, I was staying at my aunt's house an hour and a half away. And my husband and I, we got in the car. We were already expecting the usual screaming and kicking of the seat for an hour and a half. And she didn't do that. And so we were terrified that something was wrong, but we didn't want to turn around because we were even more terrified that she would start screaming. And so I put down the rear view mirror and I stared at her through that. And for the first time, I saw my daughter consciously looking outside of the window. Well, she's looking at cars. She's looking at the sky. She's seeing the world and she's taking it in and she's accepting it without being hysterical. So when we finally get to the center, we were like, okay, now she's going to start screaming because obviously we have to get out of the car. But she didn't. She not only did not scream, she ran inside like a little young lady, sat down in the chair that she sat down the day before, and she put the little machine on her head and started tapping. Like, let's go. And it was the first time in 5 years that my daughter had shown any kind of understanding of something. And so that day, that exact same day, we went back to the house and my husband and I were discussing this in the kitchen and we're in shock. And she walks in with a little cup and she says, "Dame más jugo." Give me more juice. She says her first words. Wow. And my husband and I said, "Oh no, what is going on?" Like it was like as if a ghost has spoken for the first time. And so we grabbed our cell phone and we started to film her, and she walked outside and picked a lemon from a tree and she smelled the lemon. And I remember thinking, how does she know that a lemon smells? Mm-hmm. She's been eating them for a year. And her twin sister comes and grabs a lemon and steals it. And I think to myself, oh no, finally she wanted something and Marcela stole it from her. But Raquel surprised us again. She stole it right back and said, "It's my lemon, mi limon." And then she started to sing to her sister, "Mi limon," like teasing her sister. Yeah. Wow. So my whole testimony from Mert literally takes around 28 minutes. I will not do that to you right now, but I do want you to know that it changed our lives forever. And when that happened is when you have to ask yourself, okay, what are you going to do with this? And the night before the last treatment, it was around 4 a.m, and I'm tossing and I'm churning and I'm thinking, why did God give us this light right now?
Mm-hmm.
Why my daughter? Why was she one of the first? Why did she respond this way?
Yeah.
This is and in asking myself that, I understood that in some level, I had to speak about this and I had to bring it to my country. And so the next day I called my husband and I'm like, Joel, we're bringing BTC to Panama. And he goes, they told you that? I said, no, I'm telling you that. I just want to ask if you're okay with this because I'm going to go for it. And he goes, 1000%, let's do it. And it took me a year. I called the CEO of that company every single day for 1 year until he said, okay, because they didn't have at that time the software that it would allow us to have a clinic outside of California. Mm-hmm. And we were, so Panama was the second clinic ever and the longest running clinic with the most experience in autism. And from there, we did Argentina, we did Miami, and we have a big surprise for you guys at the end. But now there's like 80 clinics, and it all started with a mother. It all started with the mother saying, not only do I not take this diagnosis as an answer, now I want this therapy for the world. It will not stay here. And when we opened this clinic here 9 years ago, a lot of people, of course, knew Raquel and knew her story, and they interviewed me many, many times. And the clinic sort of became viral because there was so much autism and so little information. And so we've had over 5,000 patients from all over the world come. And at the first year, I was very confused because some kids would do amazing. Like they would start talking, or they would start understanding, or they would stop the crisis. They would really do well. And there are other kids that the therapy didn't work at all. And so the company's policy back then was, well, we have an 80% to 20% ratio. So 80% of people will respond, 20% of people will not. And I asked, well, why does that 20% not respond? Like, why does one person do better than the other? And the response was, well, right now our resources are being spent on the 80% that do respond. Mm-hmm. And I thought, which they were a very small company. They were doing what they could. But then I thought to myself, okay, so then I'm going to work on the other 20. And I started to hire doctors, specialists to look at all these files and look at the patient. And because you have to understand the microbiome, which is, I don't know if you know what it is, but it is basically our ecosystem. We are more bacteria DNA than human DNA. That was discovered to be an organ in 2010. So when I'm doing this, we still don't know that this exists, really. It's still not being implemented. It's still not being implemented today with most doctors, even though it's been declared an organ.
Yeah.
And what we understood back then, and I know for sure today, is that any patient that comes to do MERT who has the microbiome looked at in many senses, in diet, the right anti-inflammatory diet, how many species does the person have of bacteria, of good and bad? What kind of bad bacteria or parasites or fungus do they have? And so when we look at the child or the person in an integral way, the intestine and the brain are connected. We have had a huge success rate when we treat both together. We lower inflammation. We take away all these bugs that are not serving the child or its development. And then we add MERT, and what flourishes is something out of this world. So this is really what part of, my biggest mission in life truly is just now, how do I help other people have access to this information in an organized manner so they don't have to spend hours on end in the computer looking at 1,000 crazy different things? How do I show them a path that makes sense?
I don't even know. I'm mind blown right now. what you've just said, I'm going to say this in Portuguese just in case the subtitles don't do justice to this. So what I want to say is, nesse mundo do autismo, nesse mundo de qualquer diagnóstico difícil, perante o que a Miriam passou, perante tudo que nós ouvimos aqui, saber que existe, Panamá é um país, o mundo em si, ninguém tem o poder de dizer, neste momento isso não tem cura, então está tudo bem, vai. Ou neste momento isso é o que é, então fica em casa e não faz nada com isso. A verdade é que cada ser humano é um ser humano. E se nós tentamos ir atrás, e agora, neste momento, eu vou falar um pouquinho o porquê que eu trouxe essas duas mulheres. Vamos ouvir um pouquinho também da Amaya daqui a pouco. Mas o que me fez trazer para aqui, para ser o primeiro webinar, a primeira live, foi exatamente isso. Porque eu estou a viver isso e nunca, até a data, soube que há isto. Embora a Miriam conta que isso já aconteceu há muito tempo, então supostamente devíamos ter mais isso na internet, devíamos ter mais essas informações, mas na verdade não existe. Nós lá para o final vamos revelar aqui uma coisa que vai vos dar uma luz no fundo do túnel para quem está me ouvindo de Angola e de Portugal e dos outros países. Vamos revelar o motivo que nos trouxe aqui, né? Que vai vos dar essa luz no fundo do túnel. Mas o que eu quero dizer é, esse tratamento, o MERT, eu vou fazer. O André, o meu filho, vai fazer este tratamento o quanto antes, né? Tá no processo, porque não é só chegou, fez, está no processo e vai fazer. E eu vou trazer mais para frente o que aconteceu com o André. Mas quis só ressaltar isso, dizer que nós mães temos a intuição de saber que isso que estão a me dizer não tenho que aceitar, não tenho que dizer que sim, tenho que ir à luta. E muitas das vezes também uma coisa que a Miriam falou que é muito importante também às vezes acontece coisas conosco que é para uma coisa melhor, é para tirar de nós talvez o melhor de nós, para tentar fazer com que nós vamos à luta e ajudamos outras pessoas. Acho que a Amaya também vai poder partilhar um pouco esse conceito, uma coisa tão mal, tão ruim que aconteceu na vida dela, que, deixa qualquer mãe arrasada. Mas, na verdade, o que Amaya, podes dizer o que isto, essa tragédia que aconteceu, né, na tua vida, como é que pegaste nisso, como é que foi essa fase?
E para contextualizar um bocadinho, eu sou uma mulher, sempre fui uma mulher de armas. Só para explicar, eu sou chefe de cozinha. É um mundo de homens, não é? Todos nós sabemos que as cozinhas profissionais é um mundo de homens. E eu nunca me deixei vencer por isso, ou seja, sempre quis ir mais além, sempre quis fazer mais, sempre quis ter o meu próprio negócio desde muito cedo e sempre fui lutadora comigo mesma e nunca tive limites comigo mesma. E eu penso que isso também me ajudou muito em todo este processo. Porque não há nada pior que nos pormos limites a nós mesmos. Isso impede-nos muitas vezes de avançar. O que aconteceu com o Martim é muito recente, porque 2 anos não é nada, não é? Sejamos sinceros, não é? Como é que uma família consegue em 2 anos dar a volta, andar para a frente? É muito complicado, é um processo que muitas vezes é longo, e nem sempre as coisas acontecem como nós queremos, e depois chegamos a um ponto que dizem, se eu soubesse isto há 1 ano atrás. É um processo e nós temos que o viver, e cada família, cada pessoa tem o seu tempo e tudo tem um timing certo. E quando o tratamento MERT chegou à vida do Martim, eu considero que chegou no momento certo, chegou na altura ideal. O Martim esteve no hospital praticamente 3 meses. Ele esteve em coma induzido, a lesão, ele foi operado à cervical, a lesão é muito complicada, digamos que em todo o mundo há 6 pessoas com uma lesão que tenham sobrevivido a uma lesão como a do Martim. Ele, de certa forma, no momento do impacto, porque o impacto foi um acidente de viação e o impacto foi contra o carro, foi contra um comboio, para vocês perceberem a violência do impacto. O Martim é no banco de trás, não levava cinto, ou seja, como podem imaginar, o impacto provocou lesões no Martim gravíssimas, não é? O Martim, no fundo, o que aconteceu foi que a cabeça do Martim, de certa forma, separou-se do resto do corpo, é uma chamada decapitação interna, aquilo que aconteceu ao Martim. Isso provocou-lhe uma lesão cerebral muito grave e também uma lesão na medula. Perante um diagnóstico assim, qualquer pai fica sem chão, sem ar, sem nada, ou seja, a vida acaba naquele dia, não é?
Sim, com certeza.
É assim, eu para ser sincera, eu acho que naquele momento a dor é tão grande que nós nem sequer conseguimos ser conscientes daquilo que realmente nos está a acontecer. Ou seja, a dor é tão intensa que não conseguimos ter noção, mas que é isto, mas o que é que está a acontecer? É preciso, por isso é que eu digo que isto é tudo um processo, é tudo um dia de cada vez, não é? E estar a ouvir dos médicos constantemente, ele nunca vai sair de uma cama, ele nunca vai conseguir fazer isto, esqueçam que ele nunca vai andar, ele nunca vai falar, ele vai ficar em estado vegetativo, ele nunca vai largar o ventilador, porque o Martim está traqueostomizado, respira através de um ventilador, ou seja, tantas coisas negativas sempre, nada de positivo, nunca uma palavra positiva em nada do que a gente ouviu durante os 3 meses que estivemos internados no hospital, deixa qualquer pessoa com um desalento muito grande. E este processo, isso também faz parte do processo, porque nós precisamos perceber o mal que é para podermos reagir. Só quando percebemos o que nos está a acontecer, só quando realmente tomamos consciência daquilo que temos em mãos e daquilo que nos está a acontecer, é que conseguimos reagir. E eu digo isto porque muitas vezes me deparo com famílias, com situações complicadas, com crianças com diagnósticos difíceis e pela minha curiosidade, porque eu sou uma pessoa extremamente curiosa, e pergunto, mas o que é que o seu filho tem exatamente? Qual foi o problema? O que é que lhe aconteceu? E eu noto que há uma grande desinformação das pessoas também ao próprio diagnóstico dos filhos. E isso também é um problema, porque é preciso saber, por muito que dói imenso, por muito que custe, por muito que seja difícil ouvir, por muito que seja difícil a gente ouvir, o teu filho tem isto, o teu filho tem aquilo, nós precisamos saber, nós precisamos desse conhecimento, porque se não tivermos esse conhecimento, nós não vamos conseguir ajudar os nossos filhos. Só com o conhecimento é que conseguimos lá chegar. E sempre foi essa, desde o acidente do Martim, que sempre foi essa o meu pensamento, sempre foi isso que eu preciso saber, eu preciso perceber, eu tenho que saber exatamente o que é que ele tem. Se eu não souber o que é que ele tem, como é que eu vou conseguir ajudar? Como? Eu tenho que saber tudo sobre o Martim, eu tenho que saber cuidar dele ao mais mínimo pormenor, eu tenho que saber fazer tudo ao meu filho, porque se houver um problema eu tenho que saber dar resposta, se houver alguma coisa que eu possa fazer para ajudar, eu tenho que saber fazê-lo. E foi sempre esse o meu pensamento desde o primeiro dia, meu e da minha família, porque o Martim tem mais 3 irmãos e todos ajudam. Como é que eu vou explicar? Toda a família se uniu e toda a família trabalha para o mesmo, independentemente da nossa vida e do nosso trabalho e daquilo que cada um faz, todos nos unimos em prol do Martim e todos lutamos para o mesmo. Se é preciso levar o Martim aqui, ou levar o Martim acolá, ou passear, ou ir ao cinema, ou ir jantar fora, todos nos unimos, todos ajudamos, em conjunto, em família, e vamos onde fizer falta. E fomos ao Panamá. E fomos ao Panamá com uma criança tetraplégica, traqueostomizada, dentro de um avião durante 12 horas. E fomos. O que é que nos impede? Nada. O que nos impede muitas vezes é o medo. O nosso maior problema, como seres humanos, é o medo. O medo ao que pode acontecer, o medo a tudo. O medo tem que estar lá, mas também é muito importante sabermos combater esse medo e termos o conhecimento suficiente para agarrar no medo e pô-lo de parte. E isso só acontece se nos unirmos, se tivermos conhecimento e se andarmos para a frente. Foi isto que nós fizemos. E lá fomos para o Panamá. Nós conhecemos o Brain Treatment Center através de uma parceria que o Brain Treatment Center tem com o Regeneration Clinic of Panama, que é uma clínica onde são administradas células estaminais, e através do Dr. Javier, que é o médico da clínica, um excelente médico, com uma visão muito diferente também do que é a medicina, e com uma visão muito diferente no que é poder ajudar as pessoas de uma forma mais adaptada a cada caso. Ele achou que o Martim beneficiaria muito em fazer aqui uma sinergia de tratamentos. Isso incluía o MERT, incluía as células estaminais e incluía também o estudo do microbioma. Ou seja, tudo isto em conjunto ele achou que poderia ser muito benéfico para o Martim, e nós estivemos no Panamá quase 2 meses em tratamentos e em estudos. O Martim fez várias sessões de MERT, fez estudo do microbioma, fez uma alimentação muito específica também. Ele já fazia, porque eu também já tenho, do meu conhecimento, da minha profissão, já tenho algum conhecimento nesta área, e achei que fazia todo o sentido logo começar a fazer uma dieta ao Martim, sem glúten, sem lactose, sem açúcar. Ou seja, o Martim, desde que saiu do hospital, já saiu com essa dieta, mas tudo o que fizemos a seguir ajudou bastante. Todos os estudos do microbioma e tudo aquilo que pudemos fazer, nós fizemos. Isso aliado às células estaminais e ao tratamento MERT, teve um impacto muito positivo no Martim. O Martim, eu posso vos dizer, ele fez este tratamento no mês de novembro, ou seja, recentemente, estamos em maio, não é? Eu posso vos dizer que o Martim já mexe o braço direito, o Martim já mexe as 2 pernas, o Martim já consegue respirar sozinho, pelo menos durante 4 minutos, o que era impensável antes de fazermos este tratamento. O Martim não aguentava 1 minuto, ou seja, estamos aqui em menos de 6 meses com evoluções maravilhosas. E outra coisa que notamos todos, não só a família, mas também os amigos e os avós, as pessoas de fora, é a consciência, o nível de consciência do Martim. Ou seja, sobretudo a nível de consciência, a consciência do Martim deu um salto muito grande. Estávamos a falar de um menino que falavas com ele e ele entendia-te, percebia e reagia àquilo que tu dizias de uma forma mais lenta, mais pausada, e nós temos agora um Martim completamente instantâneo. Ou seja, ele ouve, percebe, vê de uma forma muito mais rápida. Ele é capaz neste momento de acompanhar um filme na televisão de princípio ao fim e consegues perceber perfeitamente, porque o Martim não fala, mas consegues perceber perfeitamente de princípio ao fim do filme as emoções que o filme está a passar ao Martim, porque ele mostra com o olhar, com o sorriso, com a cara triste, ou seja, ele mostra, ele vive o filme todo. Nota for mesmo engraçado, o Martim parte-se a rir, ele ri-se à gargalhada e isto eram coisas que não aconteciam com tanta intensidade. Havia sim momentos de mais despertar, em que o Martim estava mais atento, mais focado, mas neste momento é 100% do dia, ou seja, 100% do dia o Martim é uma criança focada. O que é que isto quer dizer? Isto quer dizer que este tratamento não funciona só para o autismo. Isto quer dizer que este tratamento funciona para muitas patologias. Tenho a plena certeza, porque se foi capaz de provocar isto no Martim, ou seja, todas estas melhorias, de certo que pode fazer isto a crianças com, se calhar com diagnósticos até mais simples que o Martim, não é? Porque realmente dentro destes diagnósticos o do Martim é dos mais complicados e só passaram 6 meses desde que o Martim fez este tratamento.
É, espetacular. Mesmo. Mas só uma pergunta, esse tratamento MERT, neste momento em Panamá, é usado para outros diagnósticos ou o Martim foi o primeiro a ser usado?
Não, é assim, este protocolo dos 3 tratamentos em conjunto, eles são usados para o autismo e para outras patologias, mas realmente o foco principal era o autismo, porque realmente é onde há mais evidências em que funcione. O Martim foi um bocadinho uma experiência, um bocadinho como a Raquel, a Raquel foi um bocadinho também a experiência não é? Do tratamento MERT no autismo.
No autismo no princípio, sim.
Pronto, e o Martim também passou um bocadinho por esse processo, ou seja, será que vai funcionar? Será que há indícios, que isto funciona bem e que aquilo funciona para aquilo, e se juntarmos isto com isto, será que vamos ter uma resposta positiva? E se experimentarmos, não temos nada a perder. Foi um bocadinho, não é? Esse agarrar de a experiência daqui, a experiência da lá, vamos experimentar, não temos, não é? Vamos ver como funciona, e realmente tivemos estas respostas, ou seja,
sim.
O mundo precisa saber isto. Isto é demasiado importante.
Verdade. É como se é que se o não está sempre garantido, não é? Então, se experimentamos, se tentamos, porque acredito eu, se existissem mais médicos a dizerem vamos tentar isso e vamos tentar aquilo, o que se quer é que ninguém merece ter um não e ponto. Não há luta, não há nada a fazer.
Na Europa é muito difícil encontrar profissionais. Existem, claro que sim, mas é muito difícil encontrar profissionais com essa visão. E pelo menos essa é a minha experiência como mãe em 2 anos. Eu já ouvi coisas terríveis vindas dos médicos, terríveis. Ou seja, não há uma única palavra de esperança, não há uma única palavra de mãe vai em frente, mãe procure, mãe lute. Há sempre esperança. E na comunidade médica é muito difícil encontrar um médico que nos diga que há sempre esperança. Há sempre. Há sempre. Por mínima que seja. Eu não sei o que é que vai acontecer ao Martim, eu não sei se ele algum dia vai andar, eu não sei se algum dia vai conseguir falar, eu não sei. Mas eu vou fazer o quê? Eu vou ficar sentada à espera que as coisas aconteçam sozinhas? O Martim precisa viver, seja de que forma for. O Martim precisa viver. O Martim precisa de sair de casa, precisa de andar na rua, de passear, de ir ao cinema, de ir passear com os irmãos, de ver amigos, de conhecer pessoas novas. O Martim precisa. Isso é viver. E o Martim precisa de viver. Não é por estar no estado em que está que vai deixar de viver. E somos nós, pais, que temos que proporcionar isso aos nossos filhos.
E atrás, é isso. Exatamente isso. Então, eu acho que podemos revelar. It's time for us to say the surprise that we wanted to tell people about. I'm sure every mother that has an autistic son or that has, first of all, I would like to ask Miriam, in Panama, what other diagnosis is MERT helping with?
Yeah. Okay. So we do depression.
Okay.
We do PTSD is a big one for us. Just I don't know if you guys know what, post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, but right? Maybe it's better to explain it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So PTSD, traumatic brain injury. We do depression. We do drug addiction. We do we've tried Parkinson's, but it's a 50-50, so I don't want to promise with that diagnosis. Basically, the criteria to be able to do MERT is if you're a person with a brain, which we all have one, that needs better processing, that something's going on with our orchestra.
Okay.
We can take a look and do something about it. The same with microbiome stem cells. What does that do? Lowers inflammation. We connect the brain. So this is for every human being. It isn't just for people with diagnosis. We can see, obviously, there's some diagnoses that are very, like, for example, Alzheimer's, we can't treat because it will always continue. We can't stop that. But most diagnoses, we can do something about it with our technology. And so, we've seen a ton of different diagnoses. Of course, autism is always going to be the heart of my centers. But after seeing Martin, after seeing his parents, I thought to myself, I have to open my heart to everything else, because it isn't just autism. Let's just take away the diagnosis for a second and just look at the human being. If the person has inflammation, if the person doesn't process information correctly, or is uncomfortable, we can do something about it. So we could really open up MERT and microbiome to almost every human being.
That's perfect. And for the mothers, for the moms that have autistic kids or are going through anything, as you've just explained, what is the roadmap? Where I know we are about to reveal the huge news, but can you just give some kind of a roadmap? Okay, so I'm very excited about this MERT. I'm very excited, and yes, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. What do I do? Where do I start from? What if my daughter doesn't respond very well? Because
that's why the beginning of the roadmap doesn't start with MERT. Okay. It starts with the microbiome. Here's the thing, like, I didn't open a business of MERT. I brought an opportunity to people. I see it very different. And so to me, there are people who are going to be able to afford the whole thing. And there are people who are going to call me and say, listen, this is my budget. And I will tell them, go with microbiome first. I will always say this, because if you have a human being that has inflammation and you have not dealt with it, the brain is also inflamed. And so to do MERT on an inflamed brain, you're not going to get the effects that your child deserves. And that is what I don't want people to go through. You hear these mothers talk about this amazing experience, and then you go and you think it's a magic wand. It isn't. Nothing is. What can work is common sense, taking the body the way, like, its priorities. So what we do, and Amaya, part of the reason why her and I click so well is because we understand that we have to help parents with how their children eat. We have to help them get tested to see what kind of pathogens they have in the intestines so that we can remove these pathogens. We have to see the microbiome first. Now, the good news is that it doesn't necessarily take that long. In a couple of months, the microbiome could be completely ready. And so with that, then we can go in with MERT. It's not like a year-long journey. It's something that parents today, if they today looked at their children's food and decided to take away all food that is processed, take it away. What are you left with? You're left with proteins, you're left with vegetables, you're left with carbs, you're left with fruit. You take away the packages and the cans and the frozen. the gluten, and believe it or not, the dairy. Dairy causes so much inflammation because the dairy is not the cows that our grandparents used to drink milk from. Now this pasteurized and the process that they have, it is horrible for our children. And so sugar, these things, sugar, milk, and gluten and processed foods, you take it away, your child will start to get better today. And that is the first step right now, is the food. So doing MERT, which is one of the best therapies I have ever seen in my life, because it's non-invasive and it can neuromodulate your brain. Doing that while your child is eating cookies or Doritos and garbage, you're not doing anything, because even if the child does respond, for how long? So we have to start with alimentación.
Okay. So like this is the first step. The first step is we change the diet.
Yes,
change
ma'am.
the diet, and then, but just changing the diet alone, aren't we maybe left in a, so I I know I'm being a little, I need to ask this for all the moms that are watching this, because I would think, as a mom who has no experience, because I'm talking to Amaya, who's a chef, so she probably knows her way in the kitchen, she does know her way in the kitchen. But for me, a mom with no experience, and I'm listening to this for the first time, am I changing the diet? Is it safe for my son? If I don't give him, what am I going to feed him? How do I know that he's getting all the nutrients he needs? Can you help us with that?
Perfect. Well, first of all, if your child has autism, I can already tell you that even if you had the perfect diet, he would still not be getting the nutrients he needs, because diet is not enough. The microbiome has to be healthy. We have to study what bugs are in it. And the microbiome not only digests food, it also absorbs the nutrients. So believe it or not, one of the biggest problems moms have with changing the diet is, when my kid only eats pizza, or my kid's a picky eater, right? And so what we've been told this whole time is that our children are picky eaters because they're autistic. But that is not an excuse. There is always a reason, and it's always biological, medical. For instance, my daughter only ate 3 different foods until she was 13, because I believe that it was because she was autistic, until the doctor said, you know what? I'm suspecting that your daughter has acid reflux and acute gastritis. So he tested her for it, and she did. Her whole esophagus was red and inflamed. And so she would choose these 3 foods with these 3 characteristics that she could tolerate. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I'm trying to shove other things in her mouth and she won't take it, and I'm getting frustrated. All we had to do was heal that inflammation, treat that. There are other kids who have, for example, a fungus called Candida. Candida loves sugar. That is what it does. And to protect itself from dying, it covers itself with like a mucus. There's a lot of kids who play with their saliva. That's actually Candida. They're playing with the little bugs, and we don't even know it, right? And so this bug of Candida will ask for sugar. This is the kid who wants sugar all the time. And if the mom says no sugar, they'll eat 8 bananas, 5 oranges. Like, they'll try to get that sugar no matter what. And so
that's sometimes my son.
Right. So here's what Amaya and I, here's what I do in Panama. Here's what Amaya and I want to do. We don't just tell you, change the diet. We will give you the expert that will show you how. And the expert will tell you, let's talk. What does your child eat? Well, my kid eats everything. Oh, wonderful. So let me give you the perfect diet, and let's study the microbiome. Or my kid only eats pizza. Okay. Let me ask you this. And then they start to ask you about your son's health. How many times you go to the bathroom? What does the poop look like? What does it smell like? How many times a day? And these doctors can figure out why this child only wants to eat pizza or only wants to eat pureed foods. There's always a reason. So we have to get to it. And then we modify the diet. And then we do MERT.
this is so mind-blowing. I don't know if you guys are getting this. So all of this time, we've just been believing that you just do therapies because they are not eating. And you try to, for my son, he doesn't eat anything that has a grain on it. Like, it has to be so smooth for him to take it down. So there might be a reason behind this.
Oh, there is a reason. Not mine.
There is a reason behind that. So this is mind blowing. This is something that each and every mom that is watching this, let's give it a try. Let's try to understand why our kids are doing certain things. Let's try to not stay with the same tradition of thinking, no, it's just therapies and it's just this. There's a reason. And this is why I asked for us to do this live, because I needed to show this to moms. So even though we have so much information, in the beginning you said we do have a lot of information, and because you're in this space, probably you think that everyone has this information. We don't. There's still not enough information with this. So it's something that we need to work on, to make sure that each and every mom gets this information, needs to know that. So one thing that you said that really stuck with me was, not every child that goes there and does merge and it's a magic wand. It's not. But there's each and every step we need to figure out. It's like a puzzle. We need to make sure that we put it together and find what is wrong. It has nothing to do with that's just the way he was born, and I'm going to cross my hands and let's see if he grows out of it. There's nothing like that.
But we've been doing this for 15 years. The puzzle is built. And that is what I know. That's why my daughter is given to me, because I've been doing this for over a decade with the best experts, with the warrior moms around me. And that's why today I can say, well, now we have this ABC protocol for autism and other pathologies. And what it includes, the way it works, is we begin with alimentación, with the flora, with the microbiome. We begin there. Then we do stem cells and MERT together. There's things to be done. But and here's a really beautiful thing, Ruth. And I don't know if there's any parent that's going to actually believe me, but I hope that they do. If a child is young enough, let's say 18 months, just right then when they start to have a regression or they stop developing like other kids, if right then they begin with microbiome, they might not ever have to do anything else. And so that is what I want people to understand, is that the sooner you get this, the sooner you change the alimentación, the sooner you figure out what kind of pathogens are in the intestine and lower inflammation, your child might not need anything else. But if they do, because they're past 2.5 years old, and they do because their brain is already affected, then you have MERT. It exists. It can rewire and put things right back together. But we have to start with the raíz, with the root. We have to start with the microbiome, and then we go to the rest. We'll go to MERT, we can do stem cells, but we have to start at the beginning, which is not up for debate anymore. When you look at serious doctors who are doing serious science, we have hundreds of scientific papers that prove what I'm telling you. So to be a skeptical parent is not a bad thing, but don't be a lazy one. You can say, I don't know if I would do that, but research. That's okay for you to question, but take the time to sit there and read all the paperwork, every single scientific evidence that we put on our website. There's like 300 papers. Read them. Talk to other parents who've done it. Talk to doctors who understand. Do not ever sit back and say, well, that's not approved, and my doctor said it doesn't work. Did you read? Did you read? Because we cannot ever decide that a negative prognosis is correct. We cannot.
Yeah.
Se ele tivesse ouvido os médicos, jamais teria ido ao Panamá.
Yeah.
E jamais teria tido as respostas que tive com o Martim.
Yeah.
O que é que eu fiz? Pesquisar.
Sim.
Tenho dúvidas, procuro soluções. Sempre.
Amaya, podemos revelar o que nós queríamos dizer? Qual é a novidade que vocês...
Podemos, sim. A novidade é que o Brain Treatment Center vai chegar a Portugal em breve e vamos ter estes tratamentos todos disponíveis e vamos avançar e trazer para mais perto aquilo que tão bem fez ao Martim e que acredito que vai fazer a muitas outras crianças que precisam.
Então é isso aí. Já vamos ter o Brain Treatment Center cá em Portugal. Não há mais Panamá, porque eu sei que o Panamá é super distante para nós que estamos em Angola, Moçambique e assim. E não ia ser não que era impossível, porque para uma mãe ter essa luz no fim do túnel. E o meu filho, eu estou a contar nos dedos para poder fazer esse tratamento no meu filho, para poder fazer os protocolos todos, para poder ir atrás disso. Não tem longe para mim, não existe distante. Mas saber que vamos ter esta clínica em Portugal, obviamente que é a melhor notícia que podiam nos dar. E então, neste caso, para quem quer saber mais, para quem quer, que já está super ansioso para saber as datas certas e essas coisas todas, é só deixar comentário que nós depois vamos entrar em contato, ou entrem em contato, mandem os e-mails, que os e-mails vão para o Brain Treatment Center cá de Portugal, que vai abrir, e vão ter todas as respostas de marcações e tudo mais. Então é isto. Não sei se vocês têm mais alguma coisa a acrescentar, se querem dizer mais alguma coisinha aqui para acabar o nosso webinário. Espero que foi mesmo esclarecedor, porque para mim é isso. Era algo que eu não encontrava na internet. Não existe alguém que na internet diga, olha, tem uma luz no fundo do túnel. É sempre aquelas informações assim todas dispersas. Miriam, do you have anything that you would like to add, that we've come to the end of this impactful and very detailed feeling webinar live that we are having? Do you have anything that you want to tell parents, that you want to leave with them to know, so that they can
Yes. I was the first person to bring MERT to Latin America, and Amaya will be the first mother to bring this to Europe for children. And I am honored to be able to do that with her, because when your child is going through something, sometimes the parent, the mom, feels like this little. We're not the doctor, we're not the expert, we're the most scared person on earth. But the reason why we're the most scared person on earth is because we have the most love for them. And because that is true, we can do anything and everything. We can reinvent whatever the doctor said. Because what a doctor says, even if it's good, even if it's bad, it should be about this important to you. What should matter is your heart, what you know to be true. Your North Star is what is, and that is always love for your child, helping other parents that are in your shoes, creating a community. And like, Amaya said, living, going to the cinema, going with your child and just living life, because regardless of the diagnosis of our children, life is still here. We cannot look at our children, their diagnosis before them. They are people. They're our child. That is most important, not only when it comes to loving them and how we see them as parents, but as how we see them medically. Anytime we use our child's diagnosis for an excuse to their symptom. We are not doing anything about it. We cannot ever believe that our children do what they do because of a name that they put on that child. No, there's a reason. Let's find it. Let's find it together. Let's find it in a way that makes sense, that will, follow the path of people who've been doing this for decades, follow the science, the newest. But for me, a diagnosis is not a prognosis. It just isn't. And that is the biggest consejo, the biggest advice I could say to any parent who's watching me right now is, you have more power than you think, and it's in your love. And do not ever stop, ever.
Yeah.
Live with your child, enjoy your child, but don't ever stop. Don't ever believe a prognosis is going to be negative. Only you can choose that.
Amazing. Yes, it's totally true. Amaya, do you have anything you'd like to leave with the parents?
Eu faço do lema da Miriam o meu. Um diagnóstico não é um prognóstico e não é um diagnóstico que define aquilo que o Martim é. Quem define aquilo que o Martim é ele mesmo e aquilo que nós, enquanto família, possamos fazer por ele. Não só no dia a dia, não só na vida diária do Martim, mas também em tudo o que possamos fazer para o ajudar a cada dia superar-se a ele mesmo. O Martim já era esse tipo de criança antes do acidente e de forma alguma vou permitir que ele não o continue a ser. Ele sempre se superava a ele mesmo, sempre quis superar os seus medos, as suas angústias, era um menino muito corajoso e isso ele continua a ser. E é aí em que os pais temos que ter atenção e perceber que o nosso filho continua lá, que a nossa criança continua lá e lutar, sem dúvida. Um diagnóstico não é um prognóstico.
Muito, muito, muito obrigada por estarem aqui.